Thank you for attending. I know it's the second day of conference, after party, and legal topic. It's kind of deadly combination, but I would try to avoid legal stuff as much as possible. But of course, some of that would be required. And today we will going to talk about Fanart, and Fanart has no legal definition. Luckily, not everything has its own legal definition, but fan art includes two components. One of them, of course, is creativity of fans, gamers, players themselves, but there is also a second component of that. That is, fan art is based on games and their protected elements from copyright law protection. It could be music, it could be visual, it could be characters from the game. So in case of fan art, we have combination of those two elements. One is creativity of fans, and of course, second is games IP. And what we are searching for and what we are looking for is some sort of balance of interest between fans, gamers, and IP owners, holders. And I'll try dive into that and try to draw that line between interests of both parties. But let's start with some good messages. And the good message is that we all love fan art. Gaming business loves fan art. Players, gamers themselves love fan art. And that is for many, many reasons. One of them, of course, is that fan art shows creativity, support, and interest in the game. And therefore, it's part of game success. Especially, of course, in terms of financial, business, and commercial perspective. And fan art may influence and shape the market from both perspectives. In one scenario, we have game of high quality in terms of characters, gameplay, graphics, controls, or other elements, and that brings some success to the game and results in creating of fan art. But we have also other perspective in which influencers or gamers, players may create a trend for a particular game. It happened a lot time before in past and will probably happen many more times in future. So in case of fan art can also be recognized as part of marketing and promotion activity from gamers and players. And of course, last but not least, fan art can create platform of communication between gamers and players and developers, studios, publishers, and other entities involved in gaming business. So we have a huge variety of fan art. We have artwork, for example, graphic posters. It may be less complicated from the perspective of copyright law, but it's also very, very creative. Cosplay, of course, is trending and gaining very much. We have more complex or more interactive forms or more digital forms, you may say, like websites, streams on YouTube, Twitch. We also have modification or modes that can change the game's characteristics, for example, in terms of graphics, bug fixes, or other elements, including also adding some content to the games. So we have a lot of different approaches here and a lot of different perspective from copyright law. Because, for example, if we have screenshots from games, if you look at this from formal way point of view, you have screen from a game and that could create some infringement of copyright law. But if that screenshot is involved in bigger form created by fan, for example, even criticizing or talking about or discussing about the game, it may create some sort of fan art. But it is, of course, that we have a huge variety of that types of fan art. And now we need to put some sort of legal framework on that, because that allows us a next step to try to divide what should be allowed, what should not be allowed, and what should require some sort of permission in terms of creation and using of fan art. And of course, the important thing here is that we cannot forget about copyright law protection, because developers, studios, games business put a lot of effort, money, time, resources in creating a unique IP. And it is pretty fair to say that for that reason, it should be protected, of course, even if we are talking about some type of fan art, because of course we are receiving fan art as something friendly and something that we appreciate. But in some cases, I will get to that in next slides, it may create some sort of risks for interest or even harm or some sort of infringement. And if we are looking at fan art from copyright law perspective, we may consider recognize fan art as something that we call in law derivative work. Derivative work is simply a combination of two elements. We have something that we are calling underlying work, and in the case of fan art, of course, underlying work would be creative elements of the game, and then we have input of creativity from fans, gamers, and players. And when we have that combination, we are creating something that we call derivative work. And that derivative work, for example, I don't know, artwork, posters, it becomes separate and independent work from the copyright law perspective. But there's go tricky part, so to speak, because since it is combination of two elements created by other entities or other persons, for example, fans and IP of game studio, we are in some sort of permission requirement, because if, for example, fan, for example, would like to create fan art and then sell it as a standalone product, it would require the consent of the gaming company. But if for any reason, for example, that company would like to use that fan art for promotion or marketing of company, it would also require the consent of gamer or player. So in fact, in case of fan art and derivative rights, we need to have formally, at least from formal point of view, consent of both parties, simply because both parties put some creativity and that is protected by copyright law. Of course, it is general legal framework for fan art that may be recognized in sometimes also as simple infringement or sometimes as type of fair use, for example, right to quotation, but in many cases it should be recognized as derivative work. So next question, which is very important, is what is fan art policy? Because it's in title of presentation, fan art policy. And fan art policy is simply sort of rules and basic regulations on which fan, gamer, player may create fan art and use it for many purposes. And that's the basic legal definition of fan art policy, some sort of regulation, bylaws, which provides what is allowed, what is not allowed, what require permission. And important question in that is, do we need fan art policy? And we can take two approaches here. One approach would be, of course, that we don't implement any fan art policy. And in that case, we simply look what's going on in fan art community. Some activities of fan art community may be recognized as positive and acceptable and in compliance with law. Some may not. In case if they not, we can't take any actions in terms of infringement. And that is one possible approach. Second possible approach is to implement in our developer studio company, gaming business company, fan art policy. And why is that important? And why I think, of course, it is a better solution for many, many reasons. One of them is legal awareness or knowledge of fans and gamers. In many cases, possible infringement of rights or copyright law results not from intention to harm or infringe, but from perspective of lack of knowledge. Not every gamer, for obvious reason, is lawyer, and in many cases, that gamer, it's not his intention to, or his or her intention to infringe our rights, but it's lack of knowledge. Simple player does not know if something is acceptable from legal perspective. Other thing, of course, in fan art policy, we can try to explain fans, gamers, and player why this is important, why copyright games games are protected from copyright law. So it creates some sort of form of communication, because it is rather likely that someone will comply with regulations if he or she understands that regulation. So in that part of transparent communication, we might explain that we put a lot of effort and money, resources, and we appreciate creating and using fan art, but some activities should be considered as in compliance with law and regulations, other don't. So it creates some sort of balance of interest. And if you decide to have one fan art policy, you can also take two approaches here. One is that to create general fan art policy, which would be applied to all types of games and products. So irrespectively of which game or product you are talking about, you have one fan art policy. For example, which allows for twitching or streaming on YouTube, or which allows creating artwork and displaying on social media. You can also decide that some games, for example, are more important for many reasons, or its mechanic or its content is much more important for us, so we can decide to implement a second or a dedicated form of fan art for that given game itself. So we can have two approaches here. One, it's usually what we see in website is general fan art policy published on website for all games in our portfolio, but we can, it's some sort of second approach is end user license agreement approach, that we are creating fan art policy which is designated for given game and provides special requirements or special provisions. One thing that is very important to create a fan art policy in simple, understandable, and accessible language, because it's the basis. As I said, it is rather likely that someone will comply with regulations of fan art policy if it's written in simple, understandable, and accessible language. So from that point of view, it's very, very important. So if we decide to have fan art policy, which from my perspective is recommended approach, we might think what that fan art policy should include. And one of important parts of fan art policy would be introduction. That's the key part. When you can explain gamers, why do you decide that some sort of activities are allowed, other don't. You can also explain why some sort of activities may infringe or harm our business, but other one would be without that negative effect. So that's the most important part of communication, because after reviewing introductory part, the gamer should say in his her mind, oh, now I understand why we block certain actions and allow for other action as regards use and creation of fan art. I think it's pretty fair to say that rule of no commercial payable use should be implemented in fan art policy, because it's something different to create fan art, sharing that fan art with others, gamers, players, and community. And other thing is to try to use it for commercial purpose. For example, some sort of paywalls. If you want to have access to fan art or gameplay video, you should pay for that. So it's hide behind some sort of paywall. Other type of not allowed use of fan art, of course, would be alone use. So someone is creating posters, graphics, or statues and selling them for commercial purposes. That also should not be, I think it's pretty fair to say, because at the end of the day, it depends on given IP owner or holder or owner to accept certain activities or not. But I think that no commercial payable use is pretty fair rule in fan art policy. Other thing that should be implemented in fan art policy is some sort of general requirement of lawful use. Lawful use means simply that creation and use of fan art is in compliance with our fan art policy, but also with rights of any third parties. For example, we can imagine fan art that uses personal image of other person. In that case, our rights as developer studio are not infringed, but simply rights of other third party to which this personal image is referred to may be in violation. Other thing that is also important is that requirement that it's fan art is unofficial, so unofficial character. We shouldn't generally allow to fans, gamers, players stating that this fan art is created or approved by IP owner or IP holder. So that's the next important rule. And of course, proper marking of IP holder. I think it's always, and it's also pretty fair to say that owner of IP should be marked in case of fan art. I think also that fan art should not be allowed to use in other games or products because it's very similar and it's very close to commercial use. As I said, also no standalone use. So any situation in which fan would create some sort of graphic poster, fan art or statue or anything else just for sale and making profit should not be acceptable. But we also have something that we call monetization, and it's also to decide, because in case of monetization, you are not gaining profits directly from the game itself or fan art itself, but rather it is based on some sort of ads, views, donations. And I think you should consider that, but I think types of monetization may be allowed in fan art policy, and it's in compliance with also IP owner, IP holder business perspective. Of course, provisions regarding license termination, because in case of fan art, we very often we are using words like consent, approval, but from the legal perspective, it's simply some sort of license granting by company, studio to fans to create and use fan art. So in case if there are any violations of fan art policy, there should be also a possibility to term fan art policy from license point of view. Very important, of course, is contact information, because in many cases there would be situations in which fan or gamer is not sure if that, in terms of fan art policy, given activity is allowed or not. So he or she may ask the question and try to avoid those doubts and to contact directly with IP owner and IP holder. Other thing, of course, which is very formal, is changes to fan art policy, which can be made, for example, by republishing its revised version on website. So in some sort of recap, I think that, of course, fan art should be considered as part of the game's success, and it's big help in promotion and marketing, and also that creates some sort of platform for communication. But as I said, it requires prior arrangements as regards intellectual property and copyright law. And I think that Fanart is a pretty good answer to those doubts. And I, of course, recommend to implement one as regard your games. So that would be all from me. If you have any questions, I would happy answer to them. So in case of fan art, of course, you need to search for legal basis for that sort of activity and using of games IP. And as I said, derivative rights or work is one of possible legal bases. Other would be, of course, for example, right to quotation, some sort of fair use of elements under copyright law. So we can, of course, imagine situation in which we are searching for legal basis outside finance policy. In some cases that would be legal, but at the end of the day, I think in most cases when we are creating fan art and putting them on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, in some cases, also some sort of monetization is involved, it is usually acceptable. I think that line is not that you are gaining any profits, like indirectly from monetizations, ads, or donations, or whatever, but that line is drawn if you are trying to sell fan art as separate product. And in case of Instagram, if it's not covered by fan art policy, but because there is no, for example, fan art policy, in that case, I think that that should be recognized as allowed, because in fact it's in interest of company itself from also IP perspective, because it's some sort of promotion and marketing involved. It depends of the final result of that product, because you may have situation where your creativity or your input is bigger. For example, it's more complicated. You're adding some comments, you're adding some tips, advices. So in fact, you are creating some sort of external work in which you are quotating, for example, part of the game screens or anything you want, or anything is needed to create some sort of that document or work. Because in some cases, when you are imagine just putting screenshots from the game and some, go there, for example, it may be recognized as violation of copyright law. But I think at the end of the day, second time, it depends if it's against payment or not. Because if you are preparing some sort of tutorial and you are distributing it to third parties, other players, gamers, for example, it's different situations in which you are selling that as a standalone product, and that could infringe copyright law. So that's the problem in copyright law, that it's very hard to put one evaluation on one assessment on any, like you have tutorial, or for example streaming, twitching, because it may differ. But I think if there is against payment activity or for payment, that should be recognized as infringement of copyright law. But because this is also important, because from formal point of view, some types of fan art activity may infringe copyright law, but the company or IP holder does not have any interest in pursuing claims because it's for marketing promotion. So we have something in law which is called tolerable infringement. So formally there is infringement, but at the end of the day, it's in the interest of copyright owner or holder. And that would be one of the possible situations that we may look at tutorial or other products related to the game that from formal point of view should be recognized as, for example, infringement of copyright law, but at the end of the day, they are in interest of that company or that game. But once again, if there is any payment involved, probably that recognition of tolerable infringement would be different because you're obtaining profits directly by selling that type of document or work.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions? So I will have one question for you because I want to understand perfectly the policy of Fanart. Do I understand correctly that the basis of policy, Fanart policy, is that the developing studios don't want to lose money because of other people? This is the only basis for the Fanart policy. The studios aren't afraid of some bad-looking products. They're not afraid of something that they will not like, but they are afraid only of losing money because of some other.
Yeah, of course, business perspective is one of possible business perspective. Is one of possible perspective, but it's very hard to implement a fan art policy that would say that we only accept good fan art. If you're bad at drawing or if you're bad at some activities, we do not accept that. It's very hard, or it's simply impossible to divide that by that criteria that some fan art is accepted simply because it's good and it's of high value and quality from art perspective. It's very hard to provide that in fan art policy. So of course, business perspective is not the only perspective, but at the end of the day, we need to, because we have different situations. For example, given games have its values and its idea, and we can put in fan art policy that, for example, if fan art is inconsistent with that values, it should be recognized as illegal or infringement. For example, if we have a game that is supporting peace on the world, for example, 11-bit studios product, this War of Mine, and someone is using in a way that suggests that we see war as something that is necessary for whole world to step forward and progress and so on. So in that case, we may add some sort of provision that allows us to recognize that art as infringement because it's not compliant with our ideas of idea of the game itself or its value. But providing simply provision that divides art as bad or bad quality and high quality is pretty much impossible. You can add something in fan art policy that you are allowed to terminate those licenses without any reasoning. For example, just saying, okay, we don't need to explain you why this license and this fan art policy is no longer applicable to you, but just to transfer those assumptions that there is low quality and high quality fan art and that divides somehow the perception of that would be very, very difficult from legal point of view.
Okay, so if I make a very bad-looking statuette of Witcher, that will be ugly, horrible, but it will be still inspired by Witcher, and I will be selling this statuette. Will I be accused of infringing the fan art policy?
Okay, that is one of possible solutions or scenario, because please remember that fan art policy is voluntary. So you can take approach here that or usage of games IP would require consent. That's all. So you need to provide to us, for example, sample of that art or given fan art artwork, and we consider whether we accept that or not. If you don't have any legal business, that's one of the approaches. Second approach, of course, is to implement voluntary fan art policy, in which, as IP owner or holder, you're allowed to establish terms, rules, practically what you want in that fan art policy. So you're determining the terms of use, and you may try to implement some software provisions, which more general, or encouraging people to simply do high quality fan art, but it's not that that's not easy from legal perspective in that case.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions to Piotr? Oh, yeah, there is one.
Do companies really care about it? Because I've seen so much fan art on the internet, and I'm sure a lot of it is being sold, but I don't think anything is done about it.
Yeah, of course, we can also say if someone wants to infringe your copyright or create fan art, he or she will do it anyway. But of course, if we look at the market and gaming companies, the most big companies have their own fan art policies, not by coincidence, but it's part of transparent communication and part of building relation with gamers and players. As I said, other thing is sometimes lack of knowledge, because gamers, players don't know what is allowed and what is not allowed. So of course, yes, in some cases you think that you should not pursue any claims or take any legal action against fans which are in some sort of violation. But of course, fan art policy itself cannot protect, because you can have copyright infringement if you have or not that fan art policy. It's one of possible approaches, and that may help to build that communication and try to explain fans and gamers. Some will acknowledge that terms and conditions, some don't, and we don't have much to say in that situation.
Thank you. Any more questions, or did we go? It seems like we all asked what you wanted for. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.